What is up, my YouTube gamers? Today is day 2 of talking about my Necromancer Skeleton Mage Super Fernando build. As you can see, we've improved the gear quite a lot, and a lot of you guys have been asking a lot about the gear, so I'm going to be discussing that, how to get as much ward as I have already in this stage of the game. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the passive points, since that has been also a topic of conversation. Some little tips and tricks on how to make Fernando a little bit tankier and a little bit more powerful without a whole lot of investment. And yeah, if you've got questions for the future, make sure to leave them in the comments or stop by the stream and say hi. I haven't died yet. We are level 93, and empowered monoliths so far have been an absolute breeze with zero issues. Although one thing that I have been struggling with a lot is the blessings. As much as I've had really good RNG overall with my gear, the blessings themselves have not been coming along, so I'm running on bare minimum here. And also, another thing to keep in mind is that I am a Merchant's Guild enjoyer. And Merchant's Guild has been completely worthless to me. Not a single one of my items is from the Merchant's Guild, which means that because of the way that the market looks like on hardcore right now, it's been pretty much a permanent debuff. I mean, I kind of expected that with the servers being a little bit faulty, COF is going to be significantly better, and yeah, by no surprise, it's been rough. I'm essentially permanently debuffing myself, but the one benefit is that I am grinding out the reputation, which actually is very difficult to acquire. So hopefully in the long run, if the hardcore market catches up a little bit, it'll be a good time. But yeah, let's talk about the gear. Obviously, we are a low life build. Exsanguinous is very important. I managed to find mine today, but this gives me a significant amount of ward. However, there is a downside to Exsanguinous. You can see if I take it off, it's a lot of ward that I'm losing. Obviously, the whole idea behind playing low life in this game is that by increasing your HP, you're scaling more ward through the use of affixes such as 20% of current health lost per second. This allows us our HP to be low, and that is in combination with 20% of missing health gained as ward per second. So that is why Exsanguinous is super good. It's also a chess piece that got buffed, so it's easier to get high LP on it. I haven't managed to get that yet, but we will soon. That goes in combination with Last Steps of the Living. This is an incredibly easy item to farm. And then we've got the experimental mod from the Exiles, which also has up to 12% if you have a tier 5. You can find this mod exalted, and it is kind of difficult to get it. I think mine was tier 4, and I got a little bit lucky on this glove craft, even though the implicit on the gloves isn't all that good, and I managed to upgrade it to tier 5. On the bright side, however, if you are a COF faction enjoyer, these items are really easy to farm for you, because if you take a look at where they drop, the boots drop in from the boss in Blood, Frost, and Death. The chess piece has an increased drop chance in Blood, Frost, and Death, because chess pieces drop more frequently in that one. And then the Lich's Scorn also drops from Formosa's The Undying, which is the boss of Blood, Frost, and Death. So basically, we just have to keep killing him over and over. The boots have a pretty large variance in rolls. The implicit is kind of important, but the most focused part that you want to be going for is the 11 to 15 of missing health gained as ward. These two rolls go together, so if you've got 14 on the first one, you're gonna have 14 on the other one. You're just trying to get 15. Another important thing about the boots is something that I really want, but is kind of challenging, and I will take the time to explain how to acquire it, is the experimental mod that you can only find on boots. This gives you, well, we only care about one minion, but minions teleported around you after you use the Traverser skill, which will allow you to click your transplant and teleport your Fernando with you. But this is kind of tricky to acquire. So the way that you do this, if you were to find boots that have, you know, 1 LP or more, is you need to look for experimental items. At which point, maybe I can showcase you guys how I can get something like that. Let's say with these gloves that I'm never going to be using anyway. At which point, it's very difficult because if you want to use an LP item on a pair of boots, you have to use an exalted item. So finding an exalted experimental item is very challenging. So the way that you do this is through the use of these things, runes of research. This allows you, well, maybe I'll just read it. When an experimental affix is sealed, you have a chance to gain a glyph of insight. This chance is higher for items with higher tier affixes, but cannot exceed 45. So why is this important? It's because these runes of, these glyphs of insight make it so that changes a prefix into an experimental affix. So we want to increase the rolls that we have on an item such as this one, hopefully while keeping forging potential. Exactly one left over. You guys didn't get to see that, but it's got 1 forging potential. It's right here. And then using this, hopefully it drops us a thing. It didn't, unfortunately, but it was pretty low tier, so we want to increase the amount of tiers that you have overall on the item. It doesn't matter what it is, what kind of mod, none of it matters. But let's assume that we get 1 glyph of insight, and then we will get an experimental item, and you can select which mod you're going to be replacing, but it can only be a prefix. So out of the 2 prefixes that you're going to have on another item, you're going to select one, and it will turn into this desired mod that we've been talking all along, which in my case, for this example, is the minions teleported. And you might be thinking that's a lot of RNG. That's very difficult to do, and you would be partially correct, because it's difficult to get the base, and it's difficult to get the item rolling. However, there is a little trick to this. There is a deterministic way of acquiring the traversal skill every time. So there's different experimental affixes on boots, but it turns out that it's deterministic. So there's this calculator. I'll be putting it in the description, and you can go to boots. And the way that you do this is you've got different tiers of prefixes that you can select. You've got different tiers of suffixes that you can select. And depending on the amount of forging potential that your item has, it will change deterministically the type of experimental mod on the item. So you can see if I have 19 forging potential, I do get the teleport. If I change it to 18, it is now a different skill that we don't like. 17, don't like it. 16, don't like this one. We don't want haste. 15, we get it again. So it's a little bit tricky because you have to land on the correct forging potential. Obviously, they roll, so there's multiple ones that you can hit, but you're gonna have to do a little bit of min-maxing. And then the way that you increase the tier of the mod, if you care about the increased minion damage, which obviously we do, is that you have to fulfill these conditions mentioned here. So if the item has 2 unsealed suffixes that are the same tier, so in our case, we're not sealing any suffixes. You can see 2 suffixes are different. So we need this suffix to be tier 2 or 2 tier 1 suffixes. Obviously, in our case, it's going to be 2 tier 5s. Pretty good. The next condition is if the item has sealed affix of tier 2 or higher. This is difficult. Sealing suffixes, you accomplish this by using a glyph of despair. You can select whichever mod you want to go for, but it is pretty challenging because it's a very low chance that you will actually seal a suffix on tier 2. I believe it's like 20% or something. And then also if the item is exalted, which in our case, obviously, that's the kind of the whole point whenever you're using LP. So with that lengthy explanation, we can continue to other items, but that's something that I will be definitely working towards currently, on top of trying to get the blessings, trying to get the increased minion damage especially, and just trying to min-max my resistances. The amulet is very important when it comes to the base. You can get a bone base, which is very good. I don't know if I have one somewhere, probably, but it's the amulet that gives you necrotic resistance, which we don't really care about. We're an acolyte, but also it gives you physical resistance, which is very, very valuable because it takes away the need for one of the suffixes or a blessing on the rest of our gear. I think for prefixes, you want minion life, because it's the only piece of gear that actually doesn't have another useful prefix other than minion damage, which is our other prefix. So minion life is very, very valuable on the amulet. And then for suffixes, you just really only need HP, and then you're filling either the previously mentioned crit avoidance or you're getting resistances. The exact same situation goes when it comes to your rings. However, when it comes to your rings, you can get intellect on the prefix. For your... Oh, and I also highly recommend... The implicits in this game are very important. So I very highly recommend that you get a turquoise ring, which has just great bonuses. A lot of crit multiplier for your Fernando. In my case, I actually ended up mirroring my rings. This is how valuable it is. If you have one of those... what are these called? Runes? I think it's this guy. It allows you to mirror an item as long as it's got OP. And they're actually not that rare. I know that I don't have another one, but they're actually not that rare. So something that you want to be looking into. But when it comes to those implicits, they are also very important for another great reason. So as you can see on the Exsanguinous, I high rolled the spell damage, which is actually a really bad thing. It's +7 spell damage. Why do we dislike this? If you look at my helmet, I also high rolled the spell damage from 10 to 15. I got 14. This is a very bad thing because it increases the amount of damage of Inferno Shade. And Inferno Shade is the thing that deals damage to our Fernando, recently capped at maximum damage gained up to 180%. But since we don't have any damage scaling and flat damage is incredibly powerful in this game, it makes it so that in my case, my Fernando is taking a lot of damage. I mean, the build was way more comfortable, and if you're having issues with your Fernando dying overall, try and look into that, because in my case, it keeps scaling up. You can see the damage number above his head. It goes all the way up to 226. This is a ton of damage that he's taking, and sometimes if you take a little bit too long between packs, you can kill him because it's infinite. Although that cap does help. But if I were to take off the chest piece and take off my helmet, summon a new glorious Fernando, this does nerf his HP a little bit, but it's going to give you a much better idea of how much more damage he's taking. This number will scale down significantly, and you can see that his survivability and the gap of time that you have between killing monsters where he's not leeching, because the leech is the main form of sustain for him, becomes a lot more comfortable. A lot more comfortable. Only goes up to 103. So try and minimize those rolls. It's also the main reason why, for the next piece of gear that we're going to be talking about, my weapon, I am using a scythe, is because there are other weapons that you can get that are very good. They give you more minion damage. However, the problem is they also give you a flat amount of spell damage, and that is a no-no in my book. You can totally do it if you've got HP on the amulet for minions. It becomes a lot more comfortable, but for me, it's a big pain in the ass. Some people don't even like casting Infernal Shade at all when it comes to clearing instances. I think that's too much of an efficiency loss. So I like running around Infernal Shade because it does give me that tremendous amount of movement speed and attack speed, which, you know, lets me clear a lot faster. But this is what I'm going with. And then we're using the new affixes, which are very, very powerful. This is going to be the suffixes that give us minion spell damage. This is, again, flat damage is insane for this build. You always want to be scaling that. Increased damage, more damage, who cares? I mean, more damage is always good, but increased damage is not that important, which is why the implicit is not that important. And then the minion cold penetration, because through the use of our Lich's Scorn, we are converting our juice over to cold damage. So not only is he dealing cold damage, we are converting our Dread Shade into cold damage as well. And this item, Lich's Scorn, will essentially double your single target. It is very, or it will double your damage overall. It is very, very good. It is incredible. You can also see that it's +1 cold penetration for minions affected by Dreadshade per intelligence. So this double dips with our warding. We try to get as much int as possible. Unfortunately, my character is a little bit stupid right now. It's only got 70 int, but it's something that I'm working towards improving for the future. As for the prefixes, they don't matter. You can see that I've got melee lightning damage. This is just because exalted items have more forging potential, so it's a lot easier to craft it if you don't care about that. There are no useful prefixes, as far as I know, that I can put on the build, so this is pretty much what we're left with. You can always, if whenever you have an item like this and maybe you've got good suffixes and you don't want to worry about anything else, remember that you can always use the runes of shaping to reroll the implicits, and this might allow you to get just that little bit more damage. As for the belt, you always want to be using hybrid life rolls. These are very rare rolls that are very, very important. I unfortunately do not have that on any of my gear pieces, which heavily nerfs the amount of health I have. Actually, I have it on my gloves, which is pretty lucky. But yeah, as you can see, you can get up to 68 health, and you can get up to, or actually it's always flat, 5% increased health as long as it's on tier 5. Other than that, minion damage and int. I believe you can craft int on prefixes on a belt. Maybe not. Actually, this might be the other piece that you can get minion life on. Hey, good news, everybody! Build is good. I think there was something useful. Ward and ailment cleansing on potion, I remember, was something that people were using. And I think there was something else. Extra potion slot. Potion health converted to ward is also pretty good. I would personally go with the minion health. You know, having your Fernando never die, either by Infernal Shade or just enemy attacks, is just so much more comfortable. And yeah, everything else when it comes to resistances, you're just trying to cap out. The relic is important because you want to have plus summon Skeletal Mage. This can go up to +4 on a tier 7 modifier. Mine is very, very crummy. But I just got really unlucky. As you can see, I don't even have this 4 modded, and it's only +1. But if I were to get it to tier 5 with this mod, it's very rare to find these, so try and highlight them on your filter. Yeah, I could get it to +2, which would allow me to get a bunch more damage because we are using Forbidden Arcana and we're scaling with int to increase the amount of mana that we have through the use of Warlock passives. Which I guess I can talk about since we kind of talked about all the gear. I mean, the idols, they're straightforward, guys. Try and get the suffixes that allow you to get resistances. But if you manage to get idols that have both life and percent life and flat life or ward retention, use them. They're just super good. I believe the best type that you can have is this one, which allows you to have 9% increased health and then 20% ward retention. Ward retention is not that great initially, but as you continue to scale your build and as you get more intelligence and more like flat amounts of everything, ward retention will really start ramping. So keep that in mind. So for me, yeah, it's just a bunch of health stuff, you know, and a bunch of stuff that's letting me give resistances. Wow, this is terrible. Why am I using this? I'm sure that I've got a better one. I'm gonna look into it right after the video. A lot of people ask, why aren't my resistances better? I should have all the resistances in the world. Have I not ever played PoE? I have played PoE, but resistances in Last Epoch work differently than they do in PoE. So to use my 69 fire resistance, the sexy number, as an example, in Path of Exile, this would be pretty painful because going from 69 fire resistance to 75 fire resistance, which would mean that I am currently taking 24% more fire damage. However, in this game, it scales on a flat basis. So that means that the difference that's going to happen here is just the 6% that I am missing. So most of the time, because of the way that that works, we just want a lot of life, a lot of HP. We want crit avoidance, and we want to get endurance. On our build, we don't really care for endurance because it's a ward build, but endurance is one of the greatest forms of defense. And then we've got the passive points. The passive points is another subject that people have been asking about. I guess I didn't highlight it enough in the last one. These are my current passive points that I'm going with, and I'll talk about it briefly, just a little bit of a mention of priorities. When it comes to the Acolyte, we really want minion cast speed, so this is something that's important. Intelligence, very, very valuable. We get int here. We want the ward retention, and the order really doesn't matter, right? Always prioritize int. Try and get resistances for survivability. This is kind of a byproduct of that. When it comes to the Necromancer tree, same thing. Priority is always int. The first part is terrible, so we're just getting this, which is terrible, but, you know, it gets the job done. Then we're getting the Armor Shred, something that is important on our build because it increases our single target, and that's probably one of the... I mean, I don't want to say biggest weaknesses of the build, because the build is just very, very strong, but it definitely feels like the single target is like the thing holding it back, but it still does a boatload of single target compared to other builds, so kind of get the idea. We get the ward retention, and this is the juicy part. If you want a lot of damage with this build, and if you can sacrifice resistances depending on your gear, you really want to pick up the Moonlight Pyre as much as possible, as quickly as possible, because flat damage is always going to be insane for you. And then the other thing, especially if you have the offhand that I showed earlier, is going to be the Blades of Forlorn. This gives us minion critical strike multiplier, which is insane. Minion chill chance, which heavily increases our survivability. And then increased minion cold damage, which is kind of whatever. It's mostly about the crit, since there are very few sources of minion crit, and this is one of the biggest ones in the game. Other than that, this one, honestly, you don't have to go all the way up with this, but it is kind of useful because you can pair it up with the Word of Malevolence. When it comes to the rest of the Warlock passives, make sure you get Tyrant. Tyrant is insane. 24% more life is just nutty. But Heresy is also definitely a pretty good option depending on what your gear is looking like. And yeah, going back to the Warlock. Int. Word of Malevolence is very good, because if you put 3 points into it, it gives us 45 ward threshold. And then we've got the Imperishable, which only gives me 3 vitality. However, it gives me ward decay threshold per 1% necro res, which allows me to get 121% right now, which is, you know, pretty decent. To be honest, I might be looking into these nodes a little bit and getting a little bit more int. Yeah, that's pretty much my priorities right now. The things that I want to be doing with the build. Soon, level 100. Empowered monoliths are going well. And I did a little bit of testing with Ghost Flame. I know a lot of people have been asking about this, and I mentioned it in the previous video. The Ghost Flame is... I gotta say, it's kind of spicy, but I still don't know how to solve the meta. It looks cool. It can give us a ton of survivability, but I don't know how to handle this. I mean, this mana thing, it's a big problem. I think in the end, I will be using Ghost Flame over Bone Curse, because these defensive nodes are just too insane. You're getting like 80% damage reduction and like a ridiculous amount of dodge that then turns into armor. But the downside being that if we take Spirit of Dread, we can move while using it. But I think eventually I'm going to have to pick up Harrowing Path. We'll see. Which unfortunately reduces your movement speed by 40%. But with the combination of that and Spectral Menace, I will be able to cut down the mana cost of this ability to 20, I think. It's 50% cost reduction. I don't think cost reduction is multiplicative. I'm actually not sure. Which will make this already a lot better, since we don't really use our mana for anything. And then you can also change a little bit of passives with Warlock. Maybe you get mana regeneration on gear. You can get mana regeneration here. We'll see. Maybe, just maybe, it's gonna work. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully this was informative. If you guys have questions, make sure to stop by the stream. And I'm gonna get back to pushing the ladder. We're almost... It's 8 minutes. and we will be entering day 3 since the reset. So pretty good progression so far, considering that I spent like 16 hours getting through loading screens in the campaign. And I guess that's another, okay, for all you big time gamers who got to the end of this video and you're excited to play the build. 2 things. I love you, 1, and second thing, go to monoliths, okay? If you are at the end of time, which I accidentally just entered and probably won't be able to get out of, look at the sacrifices that I make for you in this video. Just go to monoliths, okay? Don't do the campaign. Don't do it. Go to monoliths. The servers don't work. If you're in monoliths, you can just play non-stop. There's no downtime. As long as you don't go to town, as long as you don't do the campaign, you're chilling. And you can do monoliths at like level 20 if your character's strong enough and you're not playing hardcore. I mean, we'll see. But like, I've seen people do monoliths at level 15 and it's just worth it, okay? Please, trust me. Go to monoliths. Yeah, you can get your items later. Log in the middle of the night or something. Just don't worry about it right now. Factions, who cares about that? I don't have a single item from factions, okay? But that's mostly because traders suck. Go to monoliths. Save yourself. Go to monoliths. Alright, that's everything. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!